People are so kind of dogmatic on this idea of keeping people out. I think it's all based on fear. People want to be heard, right? And so even if what they're saying goes against every fiber of your being, I think it's important to give people space to be heard. Being compassionate with hearing people speak their truth is really important, because when we don't do that, we don't walk into spaces with a heart of compassion, nothing changes.
Welcome to the Fresh Start Family Show. I'm your host, Wendy Snyder, powerful parenting educator and family life coach. And together we are going on a journey to help you expand your heart, learn new tools, and strengthen your family so you can build the family legacy of your dreams. I'm a mama too turned child and family advocate who went from being extremely stressed out back when my strong-willed little girl was a toddler to now thriving as a parent and having the honor to support thousands of families each year who choose to go from frazzled and impatient to peaceful and empowered. Each week, we will dive in with experts, thought leaders, authors, and advocates with insights to help you thrive in your parenting walk, as well as in your marriage and even in your career and faith walk too. Together, sometimes alone, sometimes with my better half and co-host Terry, we'll explore the triumphs and trials we all face as parents and share practical tools to fill our hearts, minds, and souls with inspiration. Take a deep breath and get ready to be poured into with some fresh start inspiration. Let's do this. Hello, podcast community, and welcome back to a new episode. I'm so happy you're here. Today, I had the honor of interviewing Dr. Traci Baxley, who is a distinguished editor, author, and thought leader in the realms of parenting and social justice education. And you are going to hear us talk today about 5 ways to nurture allyship and inclusion in our kids. This was such a beautiful conversation. Dr. Traci has a rich background spanning over 3 decades, where she has dedicated her career to fostering inclusivity, compassion, and understanding among the next generation. As the innovative mind behind social justice parenting, Dr. Baxley guides parents and educators creating safe and affirming spaces for all children. Her seminal book, Social Justice Parenting: How to Raise Compassionate, Anti-Racist, Justice-Minded Kids in an Unjust World, reflects her commitment to creating a more equitable society. Dr. Baxley's expertise and insights have garnered national attention, featuring on prominent platforms like Good Morning America, CNBC, The New York Times, and NPR. Her collaborations with influential organizations including Sesame Street, PBS Kids, and American Girl underscore her impact on educational content and children's media. Holding advanced degrees in child development and family science, elementary education, and curriculum and instruction, she is a seasoned professor and DEIB consultant. Dr. Baxley's specialization in children's literature, belonging, anti-bias curriculum, and social justice education makes her a pivotal figure in contemporary educational discourse. As a mom of 5, she embodies the principles she advocates, bringing a personal touch to her professional pursuits. My goodness, that's one of the most beautiful bios I've ever read for the Fresh Start Family Show. But I just love Dr. Traci so much, and I wanted to bring this episode to you this month because it is an intense month here in the United States of America. I know we have international listeners and viewers from all over the world. We're so happy that you are here. And the grand majority of our community is in the United States, and it is political season. It is a time where everyone is just really trying to find safety and also use their voice, right? All of us are going to be using our voice as we head to vote in November for the next leader of the United States of America. Our president will be chosen. And so it's a tense time. And I wanted to put as many episodes in front of you that would bring hope to your heart, to help you feel seen and admired and safe, being an advocate for what I call justice, joy, and inclusion. And so many of you, you're doing such wonderful work in your home, and it matters to you to raise your children in the way that Dr. Traci teaches. And so you may feel like a black sheep in your community or your church or even your school system, maybe within your direct family. And I want you to know that you belong here. We get you. And this episode is going to encourage you. It's going to fill you up with purpose and belonging and passion to be a family who really gives a damn, is what I often say. I have a t-shirt that says gives a damn on the collar because I'm finding that there's just so many of you who truly give a damn, and justice, joy, and inclusion really matters to you. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Please go give Dr. Baxley some love. Make sure you grab her book or request it from your local library because it is a very important read. And without further ado, help me welcome Dr. Traci to the show. Well, hey there, listeners. Welcome to a new episode of the Fresh Start Family Show. I am thrilled to be here today with Dr. Traci Baxley from Social Justice Parenting. What an honor it is to have you on the show. Welcome, Traci.
Thank you, Wendy. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. I forget how I found you, but when I found you, I was so excited to learn more about your work and all the things you are teaching and supporting families with. And I mean, I just feel like I'm going to be majorly fanning out here in this episode because I really am just very in awe and inspired by your work. And so today, listeners, we are going to be talking about 5 ways that we can nurture allyship and inclusion in our kids. And we're going to talk all about what that means. But it really is just an honor to have you here, Traci. So I always love to start us off in these episodes with your story. Tell us a little bit about your story, how you became an author. I mean, gosh, as I read your intro before, I recorded your intro before we started chatting. I mean, wow, you have done a lot. You have so many beautiful accomplishments and accolades, and it's just so inspiring. But I want to hear your story and how you became so passionate about doing what you do in the world and spreading light to families in particular in this way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wendy. You look back and you can identify those moments in your life that led you here, right? When you're in them, you don't know that's the path. But I definitely can identify some kind of pivotal moments in my life that really kind of led me to what I'm doing right now. But I guess the main thing is becoming a mom, right? So I have 5 children, and they obviously inspire a lot of the work that I do. And a lot of social justice parenting really started because of my experiences with my children and the way that I was showing up as a mom, sometimes in that fear, right? And my own experiences were guiding how I was showing up, and it wasn't always the best way or a great way.
Yeah.
So that, I started to do a lot of reflecting on my own childhood, my own experiences, and how I showed up as a parent in that way. But even before becoming a parent, I was a classroom teacher. And I seem to have always gravitated to those children who needed a little more love, who somehow were on the outside, and who I felt like needed a little support in belonging and feeling like they belong and feeling good about themselves and feeling valued. And so I think the work that I did in the classroom also was part of what led me here. And I think the culminating really societal change or shift was during COVID 2020, when the murder of George Floyd and all of the things that kind of happened that spiraled because of that. Really, people began to then find me and find my work and finding ways that they wanted to show up differently for their children, so that these kinds of practices and the way we show up for each other is different and changes. And I think that was kind of the shift in my work being seen by other people on a larger scale. So that is when I started doing a lot more coaching on a bigger scale, and the book and all those things started to happen. But I think, like, quietly in my own corner, it's a work that I've always done all my life, So I think those life experiences growing up as a child who always felt the need to make people feel like they belong really kind of led me to here.
Amazing. And so your book, Social Justice Parenting, How to Raise Compassionate, Anti-Racist, Justice-Minded Kids in an Unjust World, that came out about 2 years ago now. Is that right?
Yes.
Has it been about 2 years?
2021. Yeah. Like a little over 2 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when George Floyd died, is that when you said, I need to get this into a book, or were you already working on that? Was that like this inspiration that just funneled into you and caused you to like really move forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had been working on the book, right? And I had some followers, and I was doing the work in terms of workshops and having some courses, already. And I think it was the 2020 things that happened in 2020 that caused more people to search for the things that I was doing, including publishers, including agents, right? I didn't have my own agent. I was writing the book, which, it's that idea of preparation. When preparation opportunity meets, really, that's what really was a great example. I've been writing the book. I didn't know what I was going to do with the work, that I was writing, but I was led to writing the work. So when I got approached by a agent and the publisher, a lot of the book was already written. It was written in the form of, I don't know, I didn't know I was going to self-publish it. I know I was going to use it as part of my own platform. I wasn't sure how it was going to be kind of put out into the world, other than just kind of, entries on my social media. And like I said, it was the timing of it. I had a lot of it already done. And when I was approached, it was kind of a good fit for what was needed in the world and what I was already kind of doing on my own.
Oh, so beautiful. And so as time went on, you wrote your book, and tell me how you spend your days now, Traci. I know I just saw that you were speaking at a conference in the South, right? That the subject was so beautiful. What was it? I think I accidentally closed the tab out, but it was something around like addressing social justice from the fruits of the spirit. Is that right? Was that something along the lines? I was like, dang.
Yes, that's exactly what one of them was. Yeah. I was invited to Baylor University by the School of Social Work. And they look at Christian, the way we show up as Christians through the lens of social justice. And so it was a great fit for me. Yeah. And so one of the talks was working with like youth ministers or people in the community that work with youth. And so my thought was to take it, what they already know, right, which is the fruits of the spirit. And how do we take what they already know and where they already are and kind of push them to say that you're already starting to do the work of social justice. If you're living your life through the fruits of the spirit, it really is the beginning of social work. It's just a matter of, spreading your lens a little bit more. So that was that workshop with youth pastors and youth leaders in the community. So that was fun.
It's such a great combination, and it's amazing. You're so right. It is like, that is the beginning of the social justice work, or in my world of parenting, right? Like parenting with firm kindness and compassion. It's like, it really is the fruits of the spirit. And it is also crazy how much resistance in the world there is to everything, right? When I released a podcast episode called, it was with my friend Christina Dronin, who runs Gentle Christian Parenting. And the topic was parenting with connection with the fruits of the spirit. And I had a student who's like, it was amazing, right? It was one of the most beautiful podcasts we've ever recorded. And also, I just know there's so much resistance in the world that one of my students, her church, like her Bible study, fellow mamas called a meeting with her because they were very concerned that she was like dipping into, like they called it, I think they took it to the edge of like satanic worship. Like, how could you take?
I don't. Yes, we're so extreme right now that we can't even just see where we can meet somewhere to just do good work.
Oh my
gosh, and I always tell my kids to just follow Jesus. Follow Jesus.
Yes.
he was turning over tables in the church, right?
Yes.
He was asking people to show up in a way that made a difference in the world around them and standing up for others. And so I just tell my kid, we can't be bothered by these extremes. We got to just kind of see what the work is calling us to do. Yeah.
I love it, because I was going to ask you, how do you stay in this very like detached lane, right, of like doing this beautiful work when there's just so much absurdity of resistance, and that is the perfect answer. There is no perfect answer. That is the most beautiful, inspiring answer. Just stay focused on Jesus. Like, yes, I can do that. I can do that, Traci.
Yeah.
And there are days when it is just tiring, and I can imagine in your work of just tiring, right? So thank you for staying the course and doing this work every day, because there is an extra level of resistance and exhaustion that I think happens when you're doing your work. So, well, amazing. Okay. Well, today we are talking about, as parents, how we can nurture allyship and inclusion in our kids. So let's talk about the definition of allyship and then inclusion. Let's just lay that out first. Dr. Traci,
Yes.
please.
Okay, so inclusion is, and I try to do it in like kids' terms, right? Inclusion is like being a part, belonging, right? How do we create a world where people can show up and they feel welcome, they feel valued, they feel seen and heard, right? So that's part of inclusion. Allyship is when you're showing up in that kind of stance of inclusion, or for people whose identities may be different from yours, right? And so you're using your, and this is another word that we are like attaching like as a very negative connotation to, and we use it like a weapon. You're using your privileges, right, in a way that you are supporting and acting in love for people whose identities are different from yours. So can I just talk about that word, privilege, for a second?
Please, right? Yes.
So privilege to me is not something negative, not something bad, not something we should be ashamed of or fight about, right? We all have identities in our lives where we have some more power than others, whether it's our religion, right? Whether it's our race, whether it's our gender, our abilities, all of those things, our language that you have in a certain society is privileged more than others. And so I think if we can use the idea of privilege as a tool for change, right? A tool for making the world better versus using it as a weapon, I think we can really start to build positive ripples in the world by seeing it as, how do I use this space that I occupy in a way that I'm doing good, right? I'm doing good with people, standing with people and for people, and in support of who may not have the same power really in the world that I may have based on this identity. And so this idea of allyship is recognizing that, right? Recognizing there are some areas in which I have some privilege. Like for my kids, I tell my kids, you may be marginalized in some ways, but we have socioeconomic privilege. We have religious privilege. Most of my kids have sexual orientation privilege, right? And so how do we use those spaces in our world so that we are creating more good, doing more good, making changes in the world so that everybody feels included, everybody feels valued, everybody feels radically loved in so many ways. So that's kind of the difference of how I see inclusion versus allyship when I'm working with children and working with families.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, allyship, showing up in the stance of inclusion for people's whose identity is different than yours and often is in a marginalized position, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's part of that allyship.
Yes.
Yeah. That's okay. I love it how it's just, because I think a lot of times, even when I say like, I'm a positive parenting teacher, people are like, what is positive parenting? Right. Like, and so with allyship, I feel like that's, and even inclusion, like that's a word that we think we all know, but like, it's really nice to kind of define it. So I love that. And I'm just so excited to learn with you today, because I've been like really going through my own journey of what it looks like to be an ally. This past 3 years, especially since I've been diving deep into like oppression and inclusion and diversity work, and that just had the honor of being in that work, which has been really challenging and intense, but also, I mean, one of the most beautiful things I've had the honor of doing, and it's expanded my faith, and it has been intense. So we'll get a little bit more into those stories a little later, because I want to go cover our points now, and then I can kind of share what my personal journey has looked like over the last year or two. But let's just start off with our first takeaway, which is, in order to nurture allyship and inclusion in our kids, we must first, number one, confront biases and blind spots.
Yes.
About that.
To me, this is the hardest one for people because it requires self-work. It requires self-reflection. It requires sometimes tapping into things that may be painful or triggering for us as adults, right? But it's necessary in order for us to be very, very intentional about the way that we are raising our children to maybe do things differently, right? This is also could be about breaking generational traumas, right? Or cycles. And so it really requires us to think about, even when it's painful, right? Or uncomfortable, or that we don't want to admit certain biases or triggers or blind spots that we may have. But being able to tap into those things really changes the way that we see the world and the way that we can show up for our children. And I think sometimes when I work with families, or mostly moms I work with, the first thing is, I don't have biases, right? I think we don't see color. We all treat the same. Well, the reality is we're not all the same. And if we don't acknowledge that we're not the same and what we need is different from what other people need, people's lived experiences are very differently. So I'm going to see something very differently, Wendy, than you may see something. And so that causes us to see the world differently, which could show up as biases, right? And so I think really exploring what those experiences, those biases, those fears are, in order for us to be able to unpack some of those things, for us to do the work a little bit differently. And we're all on this journey in different places, right? And these journeys. And, for some people, the next step may be just acknowledging that, but not knowing what to do with it, not making any changes, but just kind of acknowledge those things when they come up, right? If I'm walking in a certain neighborhood, if I'm driving in a certain neighborhood, if somebody gets on the elevator with me, does my heart rate increase just a little bit? Am I looking for ways to maybe make an exit? Am I locking my doors, holding my purse a little tighter? Am I looking, those little things are part of our biases. Now, we may not like them, but just acknowledging that, okay, my body is feeling differently. What is that? And why is that feeling that way? And maybe it's legitimate. There's a legitimate reason why you're feeling that way. But I think being able to acknowledge those things and start to confront them is part of the journey of really showing up and teaching our kids to show up in allyship.
Families, let's be honest for a minute. Sometimes it can feel so hard to get your kids to just do what they're told. And if you are raising a strong-willed child, then it feels doubly hard sometimes. And so I want you to know that you're not alone. We have an easy solution for you. It's called our Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint, and it is just $27. It is one of our easiest programs to finish, our most affordable program that we offer here at Fresh Start Family, where in just 1 hour, you can learn our magical 4-step process to setting firm limits and following through with consistency, but doing it from an angle of connection versus force. And so if you are like so many parents, you may be currently relying on threats, usually involving technology or candy or TV time. And I want you to know that there is simple tweaks that you can change that will help you get your kids to cooperate faster and do it in a way where you truly feel more deeply connected to them, less annoyed, less frustrated, and just more joyful and confident as a parent. So you can head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/firm and kind, or if it's easier just to pop me over a DM on Instagram, I'm at FreshStartWendy. Just send me the word blueprint in a DM and I will take good care of you. I'll send you the link so so you can learn more about this easy to finish, easy to implement program called our Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint. And we can't wait for you to get started. Enjoy. Yeah, and not judging them, right? Like, so
Yes.
the thoughts when they come, not judging them, that's been a huge part of my journey, is just like looking at it and saying, oh, isn't that interesting? And just being with your thoughts without the judgment side of it.
Yes,
That's what I've
absolutely.
learned is part of like the responsibility and the learning is, instead of like the deflection and the denying or justifying, but just really being like that. It's not if, it's everybody has them. And especially if you are in a white body, right? Like it's just there. Like we're going to have them. And so that awareness step is so important, and to just be with them, because the suppression of them is what keeps the cycles going. Would that be an accurate way to think about it?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think about it too. I try to think about it through the lens of like meditation and prayer, right? Sometimes you have these thoughts that float in your mind. And it's that idea of non-judgment, right? You let them go, you let them sit there, you let them float, but you don't harp on it, right? You give yourself the grace and the space that you need to deal with them. But it's that I love that idea that you brought up, right? It's non-judgmental. It's just acknowledging that they are there and sitting with them.
Yeah. When a few years ago, when I started the anti-oppression, diversity, and inclusion work I was doing, we read the book, My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. Is that how you say his last name? And that book was so like intense, but so beautiful to help me learn about biases and like blind spots that I didn't realize I even had, and do it in a way where you are compassionate with yourself and you're not trying to defend or anything. But it was really fascinating. I forget if it was in Resma's book or just in our discussions, like in our weekly calls, that someone brought this up, but just the idea of how trauma is passed down in like literally the cells of our bodies. And so a lot of it, what I learned and what I took from it, and they told, and again, I don't remember if it's in Resma's book or if it was just in our discussions, but there was like a story of, I think it was mice or rats, where they were in a cage, and they were like, I think one of the parents got like shocked, and then I'm not going to tell this story that well now. Maybe you know this story. But it's like the mice get shocked, and then when the mice get shocked when they put a hint of, I think it's vanilla or something in the cage. These mice get shocked when the scent of vanilla gets put in the cage, and then they remove everything, and the mama mice gets pregnant, and then she has babies, and they remove the parents, and it's just the babies who have never been shocked before. And when the vanilla gets pumped into the cage again, they flinch. Is that accurate? Is that the story?
I don't know that story. But
okay.
I'm reading a lot about epigenetics, because the book that I'm writing now, it's on parenting through trauma. That's exactly what so I've been doing a lot of reading on epigenetics, on how that is in our bodies 3 generations back, right? So my grandchildren will feel some of my trauma and in our DNA. Yeah. And so if we're not intentionally working on changing those things, it will continue to cycle out generation after generation after generation. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm so
looking,
amazing.
It's amazing, right? And wild. But I'm looking at my family book right now that my mom so beautifully put together. All the way, we come from Ireland and Scotland, and she just like has everything you can imagine. Both sides of her family that ended up landing in Kansas, and part of it is such a gift, and it's also intense because a lot of it includes slave owners. And I just think about like the trauma of all sides of things that were endured in that time. And and we talked about this in our weekly meetings for all those years that we were doing the anti-oppression and diversity inclusion work, but like both sides of like witnessing things and remaining quiet. And then also the things being done to you, right? If you were Black and brown skinned, like there's trauma there. There's trauma there from like being part of a system that you didn't like didn't maybe speak up about or feel safe challenging because you were a woman. There's just, it feels like
Yes.
there's trauma and secondary trauma everywhere that in theory, right, is what we're learning and what you just spoke to is getting passed down, whether we like it or not. And so to heal from it and not continue to have those biases or the trauma reaction, right? Like if I think about it in terms of like every time someone says something that makes me uncomfortable, like when I'm quiet about it, I almost think of it, it could be a bit of a trauma response of like, this was passed down in my like in my family, the cells of my family lineage to like not speak up or not. And I'm just like, dang, I got to break that, right? Like I got to heal
Yeah.
from that. I have to do the healing in order to help my children not have that gene passed down to their kids or whatever. So that's, I don't know if that's an accurate way of thinking of it, but that's helped me.
There's two things that you said that I want to kind of piggyback on and talk about just for a second. The one thing about your family book, it's so beautiful in so many ways, right? It's a legacy that you're leaving for your children.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I also think in this idea of confronting biases and blind side, one of the things that I like to recommend is this idea of discussing your ancestry, right? Sharing the stories that your family, their backgrounds, the beautiful things about it, but also, and you're discussing strengths and any prejudice or any things that may be hurtful later, right? So the fact that you said that book contains all the beautiful, great, wonderful things that you want to pass down, but it also includes the hard things, right? Because now our children, they get a better idea of the whole story, right? Not a single story, right? Not this idea of building family up without the humanness, right? That happens, which are not always great things. But the fact that the book contains both of those things is a concrete way of confronting biases and blindness without making my family feel shame about it, right? These are the humanness parts of our family. So I think that is beautiful and is a great concrete example of how families can start to do that. When you think about it, when we talk about this epigenetic and how it lives in our bodies, think about when somebody says something and you don't say anything, like later on, your brain is always like, dang, when he said that or she said that, I wish I had said this. I wish I had thought about this. And your brain kind of plays that over and over and over, right? So that's that looping. That's the stuff that's living in your body. Now, just think about if somebody said something and you said something back right away, your brain is no longer looping on that because you felt like you did the right thing and you said it and you got it out of you. And that's kind of what we're doing with the generational trauma. When we confront it and we start to put something that kind of stops or mitigates that trauma from reoccurring, it no longer lives in our body. And we start to then disrupt that for our children. But when we don't do something and we loop in it, it's now inside our body, right? And that becomes part of our DNA that we're now passing on. So these interruptions that we do, these little interruptions are really changing the lives of generations that we don't even know that will exist and we will no longer be around for. So I think that confronting is a big deal in changing those loops for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren.
Absolutely. Okay. And that's a perfect segue into our next point, which is commit to courageous dialogue. And so how do we do this, right? So like I feel like it's easy to have courage to talk to your kids inside your family, but like, man, does it take an immense amount of courage to have dialogue, especially when people say things or do things that are just not okay. And so I know you've had some like beautiful posts on like active listening and just what it looks like to engage. I mean, there's this one post I'm looking at that is so simple and amazing to understand, but then in real life, it's just so intense. And yeah, talk to us about that. Commit to courageous dialogue.
Yes, and I think it's a process, right? It's not like, okay, let's check this box off and we can do it. It's not. You have to decide where you are in your own journey, right? And again, it may be just acknowledging this makes me uncomfortable. I really want to say something. I may not be able to do that today, right? And that's okay too. Giving yourself, again, grace and space to be there. Um, and then I think it takes small things. Like it may be somebody says something that you don't like, you get up and you walk away, right? So maybe
Right.
you are not ready to confront them, but you're showing a sign to say, this is not okay with me. I don't want to be involved in this conversation. It doesn't make me feel good. I'm walking away. So maybe that's where you are in your journey. Maybe the next part of your journey is you saying, I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm gonna choose not to be a part of this, right? So you're not confronting them. You're talking about the way it makes you feel, right? Your own I statements. It's about me. I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna walk away, right? So you're now verbalizing the fact that it makes you not feel comfortable and you're walking away. And then the next step may be saying, what you're saying is not correct, or what you're saying makes other people not feel good about it. And then I'm choosing to not be a part of that, walking away. So I think there's levels in the ways that you're committing to courageous dialogue. And but I think you should always be doing something feeling a little bit comfortable, right? So once you feel comfortable just walking away, you're no longer pushing yourself to be a better ally. Once you feel comfortable with saying, this makes me uncomfortable, I'm not going to stay here. Once you feel comfortable doing that, then you need to be pushing yourself to be a part of the next part of your journey. And so I say, feel where you are. What makes you a little bit comfortable, do that, do it uncomfortable. When you get comfortable with that, what can I do next that will push me a little bit more in my allyship, that makes me feel a little comfortable, and do that. So I think small steps make big actions along over time. So don't feel like I got to do it all or nothing. That's not the way it usually works. It's usually a process that we have to walk ourselves through. But we're always pushing ourselves to be a little bit more uncomfortable, to do a little bit more. And I think that's the way we show up for our kids too, right? We're teaching them to do small actions around small things. And then over time, those things get bigger.
Yeah. And it's like there's twofold here, right? There's teaching kids in all the moments when they bring home like a little story about school, right? Like we've had so many stories about school, or just in the car yesterday on the way home from the mountains, there was like a story of something happened at Stella's volleyball club that is so gnarly. That those are the teaching moments, right? Where you can teach in the family meetings and the dinners and stuff, but there's also all these little moments that you can teach exactly what you just said, right? Like there's different levels. And the most important thing is that you are taking somewhat of action. And that as you get more comfortable, you learn to be, because for kids especially, right? Like, and obviously I'm speaking from like the white-bodied perspective, but like for kids especially, it is just an advanced maneuver to have someone make a racial slur, someone on the blacktop, and for you to be like, excuse me, I'm not okay with that. And it's not correct. That's actually not accurate, anything that you're saying. And it's really harmful. Like, you got to build a kid up to that. But like, I
100%.
love what you're talking about is walking away and going to the bathroom and not engaging in the laughter and the jokes and making, like, that's something I've implemented too on a different subject. But like, for some reason, especially in the church, there's like, there'll be times when my pastor at my old church would be giving a sermon and joking about whipping. And I'm like, and I would just look around, everyone's laughing. And I'm like, I'm not going to freaking laugh at this. Yeah, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I am uncomfortable and I'm not going to join in on laughing about this because it's not okay. But that's like different than going to my head pastor, because we were at like a very big mega church at the time. And like, I know, like I didn't, I thought about it. I thought about sending him an email and I love you so much. And like, this is what's on my heart. And I just was, I didn't do it. Right. But I was able to walk away. And my kids watch me. So that's the second part, right? Is like, making sure you are actually doing things and your kids are watching you, which 100%. Is the best way to learn, right? So it's like, I think of the last year, God's been steering me into like all the anti-oppression and diversity inclusion work. I thought, okay, like God's going to have, like, I'm going to be equipped and like going to really need to like step into the space of like racial discussions, which is important, fantastic. Like, put me in, coach, even though I'm scared. But really where he put me was like LGBTQ+ affirming advocate space. And holy smokes, did it kick my ass. Like, I
Yes.
published a podcast episode with my friend Meredith Miller about what it looks like to be an affirming family. And man, did the daggers. Like, it makes me want to cry just thinking about it. It was so intense. We
Mm-hmm.
got so many unsubscribes in 10 minutes. People telling me I was the devil and I was the most harmful person on earth and I'm tricking children into. It was just so heartbreaking. And then that happened and it was just like boom, right? Like, okay, you're in it. You're in this. And then
Yeah.
that settled, my body settled, and then I was like felt so much better on the other end because now I just felt clean. Like Jesus and I could
Yes.
be clean together. And then after
Yes.
that, we found a new church and I started advocating, or I started volunteering, and word got out that I was affirming because I'm a big podcast, right? Like, and I had to
Yes.
have like a very intensive conversation about it and really advocate. Like, here was my opportunity to not submit or just walk away and be quiet and just be like, you know what, this is too much. Like, I'm just not. There was many times where I was like, I'm just not going to hold a small group. This is too much. Like, I can't. My nervous system can't handle it. But God slowly was like, you can do this. You can have a conversation. Like, you're capable. Your heart's going to be coming out of your chest, but you can have this conversation and share what you've learned and share the Bible studies you've been part of. And I was like, okay. And so had the conversations and are now standing as an advocate in the space that is, it's not the norm, right? Like, but that has been such an intense journey. But the reason why I brought that up is because my children have watched me and they've
Mm-hmm.
watched me sit on the edge of the ocean crying for a good like a solid hour one day because I thought there was one day where I thought I was getting notified that I would not be able to hold a small group because I was an affirming Christian. And I was sobbing and grieving. And my husband was beside me and he was just like, it's okay. We're going to find some place that accepts us. And it was just like a glimpse of what marginalized groups must feel, right? Like this white privileged woman, but the depth of aching and heartache inside of me. And Terry came beside me, and I just will never forget, like my children just like, Mom, we got you. We're together.
Ah,
We will do, we are one. And like they got to see me standing for something.
I love it's like you're making me cry. It's beautiful. It's beautiful because, whew, sorry, that's
And
what
the
we
good news
need.
is, before you, Tracy, the good news is I was wrong. They're accepting me. I'm going to hold the Bible study. I'm good. I'm good, even though we're on a bit of a different pages, but I'm going to be okay. Like it's all okay there, but parents, have you grabbed my free resource called Setting Strong Limits Cheat Sheet, where I will teach you the exact 4 steps I teach inside our signature Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint program, but just kind of the bird's eye view, so to speak, so you can peek into this process and learn more about why it works so well to influence kids, especially strong-willed ones. This free Setting Limits Cheat Sheet comes with a beautiful printable you can hang on your fridge or keep inside your car to help you get through all the drama and highs and lows that come with normal parenthood. And you can get a copy by either shooting me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Fresh Start Wendy with the word limits, or you can head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/limits now. And if it's easier and you're watching this on YouTube, you can click below in the pinned comment or the show description to get easy access to this free resource. Enjoy.
I've experienced that, like church hopping, trying to
Mhm.
find where I feel like I belong and where I want to raise my children. It's very, very difficult sometimes, yes. Um, but I'm so touched by all of that. One, the way you stand scared, right? It's okay
Mm.
to stand scared, right? And the way that you showed your children how to do that, and you didn't shelter them from the breakdown, right? Because our
Right.
kids think highly of us, but they need to see us when we're low too, to know when they're low. Mom did that too. And mom was in a low place, but mom got through that. And so it's okay that I feel low. I don't always have to feel high. I don't always have to feel like I have it together. I don't always feel like um, things have to be easy for me, right? And so I think the beauty of your children seeing you kind of ride that wave it's going to have lasting impressions on them and how they live their life and how they're able to show up for themselves, even in the lows. So I think that itself is so beautiful. And, obviously the next level of that is that you are part of that allyship for a group of people who are often marginalized, especially in the religious sector,
Yeah.
who need more support and more love in that space, in their spiritual growth, in their belonging, to feel like they have a connection and a relationship with God. I think is so beautiful, and I think more of us need to be very active in that space in our allyship, especially when it comes to spiritual beliefs and our spiritual practices. So,
Yeah.
yay! I know you're not saying that to get a yay, but I think it's beautiful, and I think don't underestimate that space in the way that you can show up in your privilege, in your power, to share that space with people who need it.
Yeah. And the next point, Traci, we have on our list is cultivate compassion. This has been something that has helped me because of the attack that's come for that. And I can only imagine. That's why it's I've aired one episode on the Fresh Start Family Show. What was her name again? Dr. It was basically how to raise anti-racist children. And she was incredible. And I pushed go. It was another one of these where I was just shocked at the response. I pushed go and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I need to look at this episode because she was so good. It was early on. We're at episode 230 right now or something for the Fresh Start Family Show. And this was back in episode 30. But I immediately got people that were like, this is dumb. This is unsubscribe. There is no such thing as systemic racism. This is the stupidest thing on the planet. You are I will not take part in this evil woke agenda. And I was just like, what is happening? How could this be a thing? And so her name is Dr. Dana Crawford. She's amazing. Okay. It's been years, but I guess it was episode 58. And she was just so brilliant. And it's how could anyone take that away? And then obviously when this episode aired about what it means to be an affirming family, I at first was crushed. And then there's a lot of anger that comes out, especially when I think about being home with my neighbors who have been in the same house next to where I grew up. My parents live in the same house and my neighbors have not done any growth. No growth ever. And the racist stuff they say, and they have no idea that they're racist. Yeah. They have no idea. They really think that they're good human beings who have no blind spots, no biases, and they're just stating facts. And there's so much anger involved, right? And there's just you just feel like you're going to and then there's fear because you're oh my gosh, I want to say something, but this is going to be awkward. So the point of compassion, I want to hear you speak to this because it has helped me so much to think, okay, Jesus, fill me with compassion. These people probably have been raised in fear. They have been indoctrinated to think this way. I don't know, but tell me about the compassionate piece from your angle, Traci.
Yeah, please. I think it's so important. First of all, self-compassion, first of all, is very important, right? We sometimes get so hard on ourselves that we don't recognize that we need to give ourselves a break, right? So self-compassion is first, right? And that's kind of self-preservation a little bit, right? But I think people are so kind of dogmatic on this idea of keeping people out. I think it's all based on fear. It's all based on fear. It's all based on fear. And mostly people want to be heard, right? And so even if what they're saying goes against every fiber of your being, I think it's important to give people space to be heard up to a extent, right? And I think being compassionate with hearing people speak their truth is really important, because when we don't do that, we don't walk into spaces with a heart of compassion, nothing changes, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's listening. Nobody is willing to at least hear somebody's perspective. And then we get more of the same. And so I often try to show up in spaces, even when I know it's something's going to be will cross my boundaries. All right. I know that the compassion is the only way to open the door. So let me give you an example. So I had somebody comment on my Facebook page. It's a while back ago, maybe 6 months after my book was published.
Okay.
And just spewing negative stuff about social justice parenting, about my book and the agenda, just the same thing you're saying, pushing this agenda and how it's, just very negative things from a Christian perspective, right?
Right.
But very exclusive, right. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, my friends and my family and people who follow me were just like going in back at him. Right. And my response was, thank you for reading. Thank you for your comment. Let me ask you this. Have you read my book? Which, of course, he had not. Right? He had his ideas of what social justice parents meant. And it was this, like you say, this woke agenda that did more dividing than anything else. And so I say, let me tell you the building blocks of my book. And I named the rocks, which are kind of the building blocks of my book, which is reflection, open dialogue, compassion, kindness, and social engagement. And I talked to him about how I saw social justice and how I defined social justice and why it was important for me to teach my kids about these things. And so then he started asking questions. And I was able to kind of answer his questions about my definition of those things and why I thought it was important, not just for my kids, but that for other people's kids. And I could feel the walls opening. And so by the end of just he and I having dialogue away from everybody else's kind of comments, at the end of that, he said, thank you for answering my questions. I learned a lot, right? So,
wow.
To me, that was right, exactly. So that was the sense of, okay, I'm coming with compassion, with my heart open, even though I think this person has no idea what I'm talking about. And I really don't want to hear what he has to say. I think through the lens of compassion, I'm going to listen. And it was through that we began to have a conversation that, you know what, we're not so far apart in our basic values. Something we could walk away that we agree on that we didn't know we can agree on at the beginning. And so I think compassion definitely will open doors and open minds when our hearts are coming through from the space of compassion. I also want to say we want to teach our kids to be compassionate, and we want to teach our kids to hold boundaries, right? Because there are sometimes that compassion is not enough, and if it's starting to do damage to our kids and our kids' psyche and crossing the lines of them feeling safe, crossing the lines of them pushing against their core values, it's okay to say, you know what? We can agree to disagree on this. This is where I stand. I'm walking away. So the idea of teaching compassion is not like being run over, right? Yes. Trying to love so deeply that our kids are in harm. So we want to teach compassion with the idea of, here are our boundaries. What does that look like? What do we say in that moment? How do we then walk away from situations that, could cause harm?
Yes. And what I've learned too is like, especially, if we're talking racial justice and if you're in a Black and brown body, like not feeling responsible for educating people, like not feeling like you have to teach this person. Like that's not the angle of compassion, right? It's like like I can feel it in the way you responded is like, I'm going to respond from an angle of compassion and engagement just because I have the bandwidth in this moment, whatever. I could feel like you're almost relaxed about it versus like, I have to put this person in their place. I have to teach this stupid. I get a little crazy with my language. I shouldn't go there. Sorry, Jesus. I like, but you can feel this like defensive justification. And it's like, well, this person probably has been raised with like, it's not real compassion. It's like instead, but there's not a responsibility there. It's just from an angle of like, okay, I'm able to engage in this right now, and I'm not going to let it wreck my nervous system. I think that's the big thing, because if you're not full of care, you can come in with compassion, but then all of a sudden you're engaged in this conversation that can really take you down. But it takes practice to develop the ability to engage with compassion, or sometimes choose not to. And I get it all the time in the world, my world, with like the people who want to fight about whether gentle parenting is biblical or not. And I've gotten to a place where I'm able to extend compassion back, just in my heart, out of my heart towards them. But I'm very boundaried now. I'm like, I have no interest in having this conversation with you. I wish you well. Here's our podcast episodes about it. And thank you so much for caring. And I have no interest in engaging with this conversation. And so for me, I've learned that kind of stops the my nervous system was not doing well with it, because I would just get so caught up trying to, air quotes, help these people change their mind or understand, that I then was not serving the people who really are interested in learning and changing. And so, yeah, I like that you brought up that boundary part. That's so important. Okay, so we have two that we've got to wrap on. I wish I didn't have a hard stop today at the hour, because as I was telling Traci before we recorded today, I have two Dr. Tracys I'm interviewing today, back to back. I normally don't have back to back, but just finish us off with these two things. And we've spoken, Dr. Traci, about this throughout this, but conquering your fears and then creating the change. Those are points 4 and 5 if we want to nurture allyship and inclusion in our kids by the way we parent. So speak to those before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think just real simply is make the mistakes, ask the hard questions, do the work, apologize, lean into our kids' natural curiosities to ask questions, to want things to be right. And let that drive us and not our fears drive us, right? And so I think if we can lean into that a little bit more, even though it's hard, and watching our kids be curious about things, letting that drive us and not our fears, and then get involved, right? Do something. If you want things to be differently, what is your role in that? What is your responsibility? In the context of what we're talking about, where is the God, where is the Spirit leading you to be a part of? Right. Some of that may be the teaching, right? Like, I feel like God has called me to do some teaching, and that is my role. Somebody else, especially in the space of being an activist, I know a lot of Black activists that say, it's not my job to teach you, right? It's your job to learn. It's kind of my job, right? That's where I think God is using me in a way that I know how to teach. I know how to come from a space of healing and service. I know how to meet people where they are to try to get them to see things differently. I think that's a gift that God has given to me, and I think that's the way He wants to use me. So I think thinking about how you use your gifts and how you can create change in the world around you, and allowing your children to see what that change looks like is really important. But this idea of modeling for your children what it is that you want them to be, and the way that you want them to show up, using the core values of your homes to lead you, and moving beyond your fears, I think is really important. And then finally, I think what I call back pocket talk is giving your children words that they can use when they are in situations that seem hard and difficult. So role playing, modeling, asking them, what perspective do you want to change? What perspective do we want to take on this? Here are some words to say if that happens. Here are some things that you can say when you feel like you are in a place of feeling threatened, or need to express your boundaries, or standing up for somebody else. What does that look like? So that they don't walk away saying, I should have said, I could have said, but I already have this language in my back pocket that I can just kind of pull out, and not let the fear get in the way of creating the change that I want to see and be a part of in the world.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about the practicing, like that is such a big deal for kids, right? Because if you can practice it even just a few times, like whatever it is that you need courage to do to create change, or hold your boundary, or remain safe and heard, it's like it's so much easier. I think like the neural pathway gets paved if you do it a few times when you're not like in that heightened emotional triggered state. You're just a little bit more likely to be able to do it, or just
Absolutely.
even practicing walking away. I mean, yeah. And gosh, I wish we had with so much more time because I would riff with you so much on the conquering your fears because that one, I mean, I think we get so caught up in our head and yeah, I look at my journey of like I remember when I first recorded with Dr. Dana, that feels like a long time ago. It was probably like 2 years ago now. I remember being so nervous for the conversation. Like, am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to offend? I'm just this white girl that did no learning at the time, but I knew I wanted to.
Mhm.
And here we are like 2 years later, and I'm like so relaxed. And I'm just like, oh my, I've stepped into education for 2 years, but it's like it's true. You have to just be like, okay, I might totally say something wrong here, but here we go. Or
Yep.
like, fears about ruining relationships. Like, I mean, I could just hear you riff forever on that because it's like if they really can't handle a conversation or you holding a boundary about having a different opinion on them around X, Y, and Z, then really are we trying to maintain this relationship? But then it gets
Absolutely.
dicey when it's family.
Yeah, I know,
So
but I think, there's seasons of certain relationships, right? People are
yeah,
in our lives for certain seasons, and that season may be over, right? Even if it's family members, the way that we respond to or collaborate with or show up for those family members, um, it's different. We have to evolve. We have to evolve in those friendships. We have to
yeah,
show our children how to evolve in those. I mean, I know we got to wrap up, but during like the election times and I had a lot of families saying, how do I go to grandma's house now? Right. What does that look like for my
yeah,
children? How do I help my children create boundaries around what we do in our own house as core values is now different from my extended family. What does that look like? And that's when I say you practice, practice, practice. You really help your kids to make the mistakes at home and say, okay, this is what we did last time we were around them, right? So what does that look like now? When this happens, what's A? We can do A,
yeah,
B. What does that look like? If we feel like it's too much for us, step C or option C is that we leave as a family. Like, so really
mm,
having the language, the experiences, the role playing, the plan in place when we're going to certain places. What does that look like? What does that look like? What is our word or our phrase or our symbol that it means we need to get the heck out of there, right? So having those
yeah.
things to create safety for your immediate family may be where you are and what you need to do in order so that your kids know that you're showing up in this way, no matter where we are as a family, we are in this together, and we're going to show up as allies no matter where we are.
Heck yes. So, listeners, you can tell there. I mean, we have just scraped the tip of the iceberg here with Dr. Traci's work. So, oh my goodness, her book is a must own. So, let's make like Traci, tell us where everyone can find your book, but also where can they come learn with you more? I'm going to make sure, listeners, that I put in the show notes the top four. I had pulled four of Traci's very easy to understand Instagram carousel posts that are so educational and wonderful. So I'll include those in the show notes. But where can they come find you and start learning with you and start following your work?
Yeah, I think Instagram is where a lot of the action happens. And if you want to contact me directly, there's a space on Instagram to be able to do that. I do a lot of workshops in different places, right? With parenting groups, with schools and organizations. I'm in the
Mm,
process, and you're the first person I'm mentioning this to. I'm in the process of creating I want to say it's going to be a group of moms, right? And I'm calling it the Grace Parenting Collective, where we are unpacking our traumas, unpacking our parenting, and supporting each other on how we can show up
oh,
differently. And the grace stands for something, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But I'm starting to drop posts in my Instagram around the Grace Collective, Parenting Collective, and I want to start off with like 10 to 12 moms who really want to dive in through their traumas, through their fears, and really do some work around that. And this first group of moms, it's like going to be no charge, right? It's going to be us like learning
amazing.
together and growing. And so if
In the
anybody's
lens
interested
of
in that,
social justice
in the
parenting.
lens
Yeah.
of social justice parenting, yep, we're going to
Dang.
really focus on really the R in the rocks on that reflection part of how we can unpack our fears and unpack some of the things in our lives and how we start to create social justice parenting around some of those things, and how we start to disrupt those cycles of, the epigenetics that are going on. How do we start to disrupt some of those things so that we can show up differently? So our children will show up differently for their children. So that's something I'm really working on now that I'm excited about. I love it. Yeah.
Normally episodes sit in the bank for a few months before, but maybe I can push this one up and get it aired because I just love your work so much. And is that maybe going to start soon or in the next month or two?
I'm thinking late spring, maybe the summer. Okay. We're still working out some of the details. So we have a little time. So it may line up nicely with you. But by the time you air this, we'll at least have some more podcasts. More Instagram posts around what that's going to look like and how we can start meeting around that. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, Traci, thank you for being here. Your work is just amazing. The education you are doing in the world, the light you are spreading. Thank you. Thank you,
Wendy. Thank you for all that you're doing as well.
No, thank you. Well, what a joy. All right, listeners, go get your book, Dr. Traci, is everywhere where books are sold, I assume?
Yes. Anywhere, yes.
Okay. Well, thanks again for being here. We're so grateful for your work.
Thank you, Wendy.
All right, that's a wrap. You made it to the end of a value-packed Fresh Start Family Show episode. I hope you are feeling empowered and motivated and inspired. Now is a great time to head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/firm and kind to grab the Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint, our $27 mini course that will teach you our easy to implement yet magical in terms of results 4-step process to setting strong limits and sticking to them with consistency. Enjoy, and I'll see you in the next episode. Hooray! You made it to the end of a Fresh Start Family Show episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a quick second, make sure you hit subscribe to our show so you can be updated when our new episodes drop. I will see you back soon for the next episode.